In April of 2025, a video from a park in Rochester, Minnesota went viral. It featured a woman, Shiloh Hendricks, recounting a confrontation in which she claimed a child stole from her son's bag. She said, and I quote, "I called the kid out for what he was." Her wording, widely interpreted as racially charged, sparked public backlash. Yet, her Give Send Go campaign, very similar to a GoFundMe, intended to help the family relocate, has raised over $600,000 to date at the time of this filming. Now, I could dive into all the reasons why this is wrong, but instead, I actually want to shift focus into where this happened and why it's so significant. So, you're asking, where did this happen? Minnesota. A state known for its natural beauty, civic engagement, and overall high ranking reputation as one of the best states to live in America. But yet, the incident also exemplifies what researchers have called the Minnesota paradox. Coined by U of M professor Dr. Samuel L. Myers Jr., the term describes a contradiction. Minnesota scores highly in measures of quality of life, yet ranks the worst amongst racial inequality across health, education, employment, and policing. But before that, let's shift to disparities in law enforcement and accountability. In 2017, Justine Diamond, a white woman, was fatally shot by a Minneapolis police officer after calling 911. The officer, Muhammad Noor, was convicted and sentenced to 57 months in prison. The case was notable for its accountability, but it also raised deeper questions. A year earlier, in 2016, a man named Philando Castile, a black man that is, was fatally shot during a traffic stop in Falcon Heights, Minnesota. Castile worked as a nutrition services advisor for the St. Paul Public School District, remembered for his daily care and familiarity with the children he served. Yet, the officer who killed him was acquitted of all charges. And it makes you wonder, would the world have even believed George Floyd if he hadn't been caught on camera? All the cases above occurred in Minnesota, but the legal outcomes and the public narrative surrounding them were starkly different. Justice isn't about just individual cases, but, what does the broader trend even look like? Years after George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis, Minnesota still displays one of the deepest racial disparities in the US. Black Minnesotans are more likely to be unemployed and less likely to own homes. Educational achievement gaps between white students and black students, which, by the way, many are actually African immigrants, are very still much persistent and wide. And three, access to healthcare and life expectancy also vary significantly amongst racial lines. These racial disparities point to structural inequalities embedded in public institutions, not just individual bias. So, how do people make sense of these contradictions? Part of the answer lies in local culture, specifically Minnesota nice. Often described as courteous and non confrontational, this cultural norm can mask deeper discomfort with topics like race and power. As noted in MinnPost for people of color, Minnesota nice can resemble quote unquote subtle but persistent forms of exclusion and racism, end quote. This polite avoidance can make it harder to name harm and even harder to correct it. So, how does this shape the Minnesotan lived experience? For many Black Minnesotans, racism is not always overt, it's indirect. It appears in hiring practices, housing decisions, medical access, or daily interactions that prioritize comfort over equity. Of course, this experience isn't lived for everyone, sometimes it is overt. The Black experience is not a monolith. Sociologist Eduardo Bonilla Silva describes this as colorblind racism, where racial inequality continues but without the explicit language of racism. The result is a system that remains unequal even if it appears neutral. The Minnesota paradox isn't about surface level contradiction. It's about the structures that create and sustain equality, despite progressive self image. A viral fundraiser, a tale of two police shootings, persistent gaps in opportunity. They're not all isolated incidents. They're patterns. Understanding this paradox means looking beyond politeness and towards the system level's accountability. Ayada out.